I remember people talking about networking and the importance. It was like you needed to go meet people so you could get something out of that relationship. But I saw in my life where it begin to change, where when I would meet people, I would think, how can I help them? Like, you're looking for people that need help. How can I serve them in a way that brings value to them, instead of who can bring value to me and what I'm trying to do? And so if you start with the right motivation, it does reap benefits.
Today, we will be hearing from Jared Arnett, who calls himself the Appalachian or rural optimist, and has spent his career helping teams and rural communities do things that have never been done. He was the founding executive director of Shaping Our Appalachian Region, is the network leader for Together for the Mountains, co-founded Mountain Music Exchange, which is now the largest retailer of guitars in Eastern Kentucky, and serves as the founding pastor of New Beginnings Fellowship Church. Jared lives just outside of Pikeville, Kentucky with his wife, Bethany, and their two amazing children, Rosalind and Harker. Well, hey, welcome back to the High Purpose Practice Leadership Podcast. Before we get started, Mike, you have just welcomed Jared Arnett as our guest, and you picked him for a specific reason. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I met Jared about a year ago, and first time I met him, I was so impressed because I've been really thinking about this new kind of leader, that so much in our world is changing and it's requiring a different kind of leadership. And whenever I met Jared, I said, oh, there it is. He's got the secret sauce of what I think it's going to take to be an effective leader in these times. So I'm super excited that you all are going to get to hear from Jared today.
Yeah, I can't wait. I think sometimes it's good to know in philosophy what a new type of leader looks like, but then to be able to kind of hear someone and hear their story. So excited. Let's take a listen together.
All right. Hey, guys, welcome back to the High Purpose Podcast, and really excited to introduce you to my friend Jared Arnett today. Jared is a extremely talented and unique individual. Jared, I was looking at just some of your titles right on the on your signature. We've got pastor, network leader, co-founder, and that's just to get you started. Really an entrepreneur, and I love this idea here of the Appalachian Rural Optimist. What a cool title that is. So we're both here in Kentucky. Me a little more in Central Kentucky, and you a little more in Eastern Kentucky, but we have some commonality in Eastern Kentucky. So hey, welcome to the show today.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
We eventually we want to be talking about some things about engaging our community and networking and being a bridge builder, which you do so well. But I thought before we got into some of the logistics and how-to stuff, I'd love to just hear a little bit about your story, and in particular, your kind of personal and professional journey that gave you that real heart for Eastern Kentucky. And I know that you did some good work with a group called SOAR. So I wanted to at least make sure that you include that in there somewhere.
Yeah, happy to do that. So born and raised in Eastern Kentucky, and went to college at what was then Pikeville College, now University of Pikeville, in 2001. Ended up transferring from there, graduated from Morehead State, another university in the region. And I was always in music, so I used to play music, taught piano and guitar lessons through college. But I majored in paralegal studies and government. I'd planned on going to law school, and ended up doing an internship my last semester of undergrad with a judge, and did not love it at all. And so I decided I'd taken a bunch of business classes just because. Actually, my future mother-in-law at the time looked at me one time and said, "Hey, I think you'd be good at business." I was like, nobody's ever told me that. So I started taking some business classes, really fell in love with it. And so when I graduated, I decided to go straight into an MBA program, and started working at the guitar store that I used to teach lessons at in Pikeville. And so that was a fun experience. I got to run a small business and do an MBA and apply these things I was learning in this super small retail store in Eastern Kentucky. But where we were able to, we started selling online and doing eBay and doing a lot of different things. from Eastern Kentucky. I think that was where I started seeing the potential for rural communities, and really with connectivity. Even me personally, I started my eBay account in 1996 in the head of a hollow in Magoffin County, and started just buying and trading guitars and things then, which completely changes. All of a sudden the local flea market is global. Right.
Yeah, right.
And so that kind of started my fire, and working in that small business, we had some success, and I just got a heart to serve and help other small businesses, and worked for the Small Business Development Center for a little while. Ended up getting a job at the Chamber of Commerce, just working on economic development. And I was coming up through all of this at a time when this region was shedding coal jobs, thousands. And so we were really starting to reimagine the future of the region economically. And so I worked at the chamber for 4 years, and then I was hired as the founding executive director of SOAR, shaping our Appalachian region in 2013, I think 2014. So that was kind of my journey. It was a crazy journey, and SOAR was led by the governor and congressman. It was started as this bipartisan initiative in the middle of the coal decline to say, what is the future of Appalachia? And so it was Governor Steve Beshear at the time and Congressman Hal Rogers hosted a summit in Pikeville. These two well-respected, one Democrat, one Republican, stood on the same stage in Pikeville. 1,600 people showed up for the first summit and said, hey, coal's never going to be the same. We've got to do something different. And I saw in that, I spoke on a panel at that first one and was just kind of a volunteer, but I saw just that level of leadership change the whole public dialogue of Eastern Kentucky, and opened up these opportunities for partnerships and working together. We got common goals that really changed. I mean, that one event sort of did good things after that, but that one event really changed a lot in this region from a community development standpoint.
Man, so good. A couple of things I was just thinking about as you were talking about. If anyone here comes from a fairly large self-sustainable organization, a lot of that becomes internal, and you kind of think about being able to lead and manage and run your own thing. But anyone who has gone into a smaller niche or a smaller environment, I know when I was in Pittsburgh, was part of a larger church, then came to Kentucky, and it was just a different culture, and things were smaller, and we didn't have the same financial resources just at our disposal. So I had to start to think differently about and revision. And even if that's not the case of someone who's leading, if you're listening today and you're leading a smaller or more rural kind of situation. But the other thing is, coming out of COVID, we're all in a new normal right now. And so a lot of the ways that we were doing things are changing. And we all know that we're in this, pivot point in history. But what's hard is to figure out what's the new way. And so I think a lot of what you're talking about is going to be very relevant for anyone who's in a small business or small church or, a rural atmosphere, but really can be anybody who's leading change, leading a new way of doing things when the old way isn't going to get it done anymore. We're not going to get there from where we are by doing the same thing. Anybody who's making those kind of changes, this kind of conversation is going to be real helpful.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For sure. There was times one of our slogans at one of our summits for SOAR one year was this idea that in order to accomplish outcomes that have never been achieved, you have to do things that have never been done.
Oh, come on.
And so that began to unlock, like when you're in that state of uncertainty, people have to have the freedom to try new things, and fail. That's okay. Like, we are absolutely going to try new things that might not work, but we are going to celebrate it, man. If you're out trying to solve a problem and it doesn't work, that's great. We just learned how not to do it. Let's try it a different way. And so we tried to unlock that. We tried to help people understand, the current situation, why it's not a healthy situation. We tried to cast some vision on what we thought was possible. But how do you get from point A to point B you just put a lot of smart and creative people together and let them come up with solutions, and it's fun to watch.
I would think it was Jim Collins in the book Good to Great who said first who, then what. And
Yeah,
I really like that because I think sometimes, the pathway is clear, but for a lot of us, we're in uncharted territory right now. And
yeah,
anytime when it's uncertain, instead of one person getting into a room and charting a course where you think this is the way to go, the better approach is to get the right people in the room, right?
yes,
And
absolutely,
that's where the magic happens, and that's where the way forward starts to come forward.
for sure, for
So I
sure.
I
And
really I really like that a lot, actually.
at SOAR, we were a small organization. I was the first employee. When we left 6 years later, we really had a core team of 5 or 6, and then we probably had 13 total.
Okay.
But we were working with 250 partners. And
Mhm.
so even though we might not have had an amazing creative arts team on our staff, the University of Pikeville was a contributing partner that said, we'll let you use our creative team for the summit. We had Pike TV that said, we'll do video production for you. Like we were a small staff, but a huge team, I guess, is the way we would always approach it.
Ah, that's great. Okay, so now you're starting to get into some stuff I really want to dig into because I think this is, man, you've got some secret sauce in you that I just wish we could spread out. And I really mean this. What makes you unique, I really believe, is a big part of what it's going to take to lead in the future. But not everybody's been leading this way up till now. And
Yeah.
so, in particular, when it comes to things like networking, engaging our community and partnerships. So let's just take networking. You're already starting to unpack it a little bit here, but why is networking important, and what leadership attitudes or actions do you think are essential for starting to build some bridges to people? So I really want you to kind of unpack that. What's
Yeah.
under the hood of a leader who's a good networker?
I think two things for me, coming up through, college and MBA, I remember people talking about networking and the importance. It was like you needed to go meet people so you could get something out of that relationship. And as a Christian and also a pastor, I don't think I ever thought, oh, that's not the right way. But I saw in my life where it begin to change, where when I would meet people, I would think, how can I help them?
Mm.
Like you're looking for people that need help. How can I serve them in a way that brings value to them instead of who can bring value to me and what I'm trying to do? And in our role at SOAR, that was really our job, was to raise the capacity of all the partners, either new resources or equipping. And so for me, I think you build genuine relationships when you come into it, not for yourself, but really to serve, to help the other person and contribute value. And when you contribute value, there's appreciation out of that, and usually it reciprocates. They're willing to help, and that's not the motivation, but I think that's the way God designed it. And so if you start with the right motivation, it does reap benefits. And so that was kind of always the way I approached it. And then the other part of it was in networking and this type of work is the value of an introduction, because when people are trying to work together and collaborate, there's a level of trust where you will share what you're working on. There's a level of trust where I'm working on this, you want to work with me. And then there's the next level of trust of where let's create something together, and just put all the cards on the table, and I don't care who gets the credit. And so on that continuum, what we would end up being at SOAR is we would build these one-on-one relationships so that people trusted us. And so that if we were able to say, hey, you need to go meet so-and-so, they can help you with this. Like the 6-month get to know you phase became one call. I was like, okay, SOAR said you're good, we're good, we're all good, we're in this together. So you can immediately build that bridge, and then we just step out, and the value we brought was just the credibility we had developed.
Oh man, I love it. So I preached recently, who's the greatest? And of course, Jesus says that, all the ways people tend to measure greatness. And of course, in the Bible, these disciples are actually arguing while he's about to go to the cross. They're arguing about which of them is the greatest and who's going to sit at his right and his left. They're jockeying and positioning for first place, right? And
Right,
that's,
right.
I mean, most of us in our humanness, that's kind of our natural state, is how do I get what I need to do to get for me where I need to go. That's kind of that. And you talk about networking, but Jesus comes and says, actually, you know what? The greatest is very different. It's the one who doesn't come to be served, but to serve
Yeah,
and give his life, right? So he certainly models that for us and motivates us because of what he's done for us. But people can tell the difference. People can tell the difference when you're in a relationship if you're going to be a taker or if you're there and you genuinely care about them, right? So that
absolutely.
trust, and I think it was Covey who wrote a book about the speed of trust, right? When
Yeah,
trust is there, things move faster.
yep.
When there's mistrust, then it slows it up and bureaucracy comes and red tape comes and policies come in. Why? Because we're not sure and we got to do all these checks, But when trust is there, man, we can go together and go quick. So you have a good way of building that trust, so that when a referral comes, you can get going quick together.
That's it. That's the value of a and so our role was like a backbone organization and collective impact work, the intermediary. That was really our role. And that's a hard thing, for someone who's not in this work, you know, early on it's where they say, what do y'all even do? Right. Like, because we didn't make loans, we didn't start businesses, we didn't recruit industry, we didn't do healthcare training, like we didn't do any of the things. We were really just the connector and facilitator of it
Yeah.
all. And over the years, people began to see the value of the work because their work got better. They got more funding, they were more efficient, they were more productive. They worked with people they would have never worked with before. And it just and it starts to it just starts to take off exponentially kind of when people get in and to take advantage of it.
Hey, you threw out a term there that I think is actually a fairly technical term, but just maybe rolled off your tongue. But use the word collective impact.
Yeah.
Collective impact. So unpack that a little bit. What is collective impact?
Yeah, this was we did it for 3 years and didn't know it. And I was really like Googling saying what, because I would ask myself, like I could tell the stories of what was happening and the good that was coming out of it, but I couldn't explain why or how we were doing it. And so I was just Googling like other organizations kind of like ours and came across Collective Impact, which turns out is a huge thing and that has national kind of research behind it and a method and a process, which we were kind of following, but we didn't even know it existed. We were kind of like recreating it.
Hmm.
And when I say we, I don't just mean our team. It was like all those partners.
Yeah.
But collective impact is where you kind of take a common goal for a community. Usually it's super simple. So maybe it's, let's raise graduation rates in Lexington, Kentucky. Maybe it's west side of Lexington, Kentucky, one school district. And so that's a common goal. But you bring the faith community, small business community, you bring the Rotary Club, you bring the school district, you bring the mayor's office, you bring all these stakeholders together and you say, here's the common goal. What can we each do to help contribute to moving this metric forward? Well, when you have a meeting like that, it's usually everybody's like, well, I could do this, I could do that. And without the kind of the anchor or the institution, the backbone organization, everybody goes back to their full-time job and work, and they do what they do every day. So the role of the backbone organization is 2 weeks later, send the email and say, hey, Johnny, did you this? Do you need help on that? The next meeting is in 2 weeks. Everybody needs to report out on progress on what you had committed to do. SOAR was that, but on half the state of Kentucky and on every issue. And so, it has to have a common agenda, so a common goal. We called that the blueprint for the future of Appalachia. It's got to have a backbone organization, shared metrics. So what are we all measuring? And so it had all this research behind it, but it didn't have, I never found the tactics that said, okay, you want to do it. Here's what you do tomorrow. And so we kind of developed that. Looking backward, we said, what do we do well, and how's it making it? What's making impact? And it was convenings, communications, and coaching.
There you go.
And so we were able to build this dashboard around how many convenings did we have last quarter, how many people did we reach through our communications, sharing the narratives, the stories of the successes, the progress. And then how many organizations did we coach? Did we have one-on-one sit down with and say, we'll help you move this, and to make those introductions. And then, those were all kind of number based. And then we'd say, from this one convening we had about broadband, the county judge in Leslie County started a broadband board. Right. So those were the outcomes. So we would share those stories. But that was really, that was a journey for me and the entire group. The day we said, oh, that's what we do, and we have a dashboard, it was like, oh man, this is pretty fun work.
You didn't know you were working, probably, actually.
Yeah, and our board really appreciated it. Like for 3 years, they were like excited, but didn't know why, and so that really helped. And it works for any collective impact organization. And I've shared with you, I think, in this new role I'm in, those three things are really how the early church in the book of Acts, how it expanded and worked together. They had convenings. They all would get together in different places. They were writing letters to one another, sharing stories about what one church is doing and what one pastor's doing, and then coaching and mentoring each other along the way. So, and I didn't get that connection until in the last couple of years.
Now we want to land the conversation, the part of the podcast where we prepare you to put this into practice. Well, hey, we just listened to Jared Arnett and him talking a little bit about networking and innovation and integration and all of that. And so we're kind of entering into this new climate, like we've been talking about, this post-pandemic world. And it requires a new type of leader because we're entering into a new type of season. So tell us why this new type of leader is so important and why it's crucial.
Yeah, thanks. I said in the beginning before we went to Jared that I really see in him a picture of what the new kind of leader looks like. And I am totally convinced that that's true with him. And what's happening in the world is changing around us that I see a couple things. One, there's so much uncertainty. It used to be that when things were clear and you could look at the future and kind of map it out, that one person might be able to just get into a room and say, hey, here's where we need to go. And everybody would follow that person. But there's so much complexity and uncertainty now that it takes a lot of perspectives to be able to do that. Also, there's a huge shift I see going from sort of volume or bigger, better, faster to value and quality and even person-centered approach. And that shift of how do we actually rally around a cause or a person and bring a diverse group of resources for that cause or for that person. Like in healthcare, it's patient-centered care. And a lot of stuff that Jared was talking about, it might be the needs of a community or a whole region even. So a clear picture of what eventually Jared told us is called collective impact is really becoming really important. And so this change, from uncertainty and a change of really like high value where each person matters coming out of the pandemic, we really started thinking about, what does the value of each person bring and how do we kind of check in with people? So all of this, I think, requires a new kind of leader, someone who's going to be able to bring diverse groups of people together for common causes or to integrate together for the good of a single person. And that's different than just more, better, faster, and clear direction. It's evident where we need to go. Let's go take the hill. So I think he's a great picture of the way that he talks and lives this out.
That's so interesting because when it was about bigger, better, faster, there's almost like a pretty clear roadmap that might work across the spectrum, right? For that. And so you don't have to have diverse thought necessarily. I mean, you're just trying to get there. But when we're talking about person-centered and quality and that really requires diverse people because we're caring for diverse people. So I can definitely see that. Jared had this quote that was so good. He said, in order to accomplish outcomes that have never been achieved, you have to do things that have never been done, which is innovation, right? So talk a little bit about the role of innovation, and our willingness, or maybe our unwillingness, the
Yeah.
fear of trying new things.
Well, yeah, actually, that's exactly right. Because what happens is if you are comfortable with the current process or the status quo, then you won't want to see change. But when there's enough of a discomfort with how things are, and you recognize that things cannot stay the same, all of a sudden there has to be a different outcome. And the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And what Jared says, listen, if you want different results, we've got to try things new. And the truth of the matter is, there's not a roadmap right now for how to do for each solution. Now, what Jared does tell us is that there can be a roadmap for coming together and bringing innovative ideas. And so innovation becomes super important. And I really loved what he talked about. Did you notice what he talked about? Not being afraid to fail and not being afraid to try things. And he would say, we would bring people together and say, it's okay. It's okay to learn and try new things. And if we're going to come up with new ideas, we're going to have to do some things that aren't going to work along the way. But that kind of innovative spirit becomes really important. And I was thinking about that because I think there's some reasons why people don't want to innovate. One, comfort. But two, we don't like to fail. Nobody likes to fail naturally. But I think there's an identity part of leaders where we tie who we are to what we do. So if we continue to do things that fail, we feel like a failure. So you have to get past that and just say, hey, listen, who you are is more than what you do. Also, for innovation, I think it was Michael Jordan that said, you're going to miss 100% of the shots you never take. So if you don't try it, you're never going to get it in. The only way you got a shot at getting it in is if you put it up. And so you've got to try and you may miss some, but eventually something's going to go in. And then the other thing I was thinking of is other people get inspired when you try. It takes courage to try things, and not everybody has that gumption to kind of go first. So when you'll try something, you'll also spur creativity and innovation in others. So can't be complacent with the status quo. Got to want something different. Also got to be willing to, put yourself out there and try something new.
Yeah. There's a couple of things you said right there that I think is so good. And again, it goes back to, like, it's one thing that we know, but it's really hard to live out. And so, the separation of who we are and what we do. You touched on this a couple podcasts ago, actually, just
Yeah.
the value
Yeah.
of who we are and what we do, and how we separate those two things, I think, is key and is crucial to be a new leader. That in order to be a sustainable leader, a leader that will grow, a leader that will, be, a part of this new climate that we're talking about, that is something that is required, is to separate yourself from that. And you've
Yeah.
started doing that work.
Yeah. It's, I sort of backed into it because the way that I was comfortable doing things from before, it wasn't going to translate into a new environment. So, largely my move to Kentucky for me personally became a different culture. And there was specifically, I talked about with Jared, that there was just less resources to work with, So you start thinking, well, how can I still get good outcomes with not a lot of tools to work with, essentially. And that's what kind of started getting personally my own transformation to think about, this idea of collective impact, or working together with people, and eventually partnering and all those kind of things, networking, that kind of stuff. But to even get to that point, I had to put the model aside and say, I'm going to look for a new way. I'm going to look for a different way. I don't have a box for this yet. I don't have a category. I've not even seen it done very often, but I've got to look. So I started looking for new ways. And a lot of the stuff that Jared was talking about were things that I came up with out of necessity, to see our church and our community and the other organizations I was working with to thrive with lower resources. And then you add the pandemic, and now you have uncertainty and all the workforce crisis and all these other things. All of a sudden, what was kind of I backed into from a economic necessity, all of a sudden the whole climate is changing, and so I'm even more convinced that this kind of working together is the way to go.
Yeah, so the collective impact you had said, this new kind of innovation really requires integration of people,
Yeah.
perspectives, things like that, the integration of ideas. And so expand on that a little bit. What does that look like?
Yeah, we pitched it with Jared with the idea of networking. How do you actually build your network? How do you actually work together with other people? And if you're going to integrate, that means that many parts are going to come together for a common cause. And so this is, I think, what Jared's doing so well is he's putting out there a cause or a need in a community that's greater than any one person can do. And anytime there's a cause or a problem that's so big that it's going to require more effort, more resources, more skills, more relationships, then you start saying, how can we come together? And so Jared, I loved his 3 levels of trust, because that really, when you start to talk about networking, he mentioned that really a big part of his role was accelerating people's trust with one another. And did you notice his serving leader question there? He said, a lot of times when people talk about networking, they talk about, you got to go meet somebody so that you can get what you want. Right.
Yeah.
And he said, but
Right.
he changes his thought. Do you remember what he said? It was so that, how can I
Help. What
help?
can I
How can I
do?
serve you? Yeah. Right. So I thought, man, there it was right there, serving leadership. But he really models that. When you have a conversation with Jared, you know that he's actually looking out for your best interest, and he's got a particular cause that he's trying to work through, and then he brings other people along on that cause. And so I loved his three layers of trust. The first layer of trust when you're networking with people is, I will share what I'm doing. And that actually is a layer of trust, because some people want to keep that confidential. Some people say this is sort of our our process, the way we do things. And they're not comfortable sharing that with other people. They don't want to give up that information. What's that?
Gatekeeping. Yeah.
Gatekeeping. Yeah, exactly. Right. So being willing to share what you're working on is kind of step 1. Step 2, he said, was, will you work with me on something? Like, I have something I'm working on. Will you join me? So you actually have the trust to bring someone in to that work that you're doing. Instead of trying to be the heroic leader and do it all yourself, you say, hey, I've got something, but it's too big for me. Can you come alongside and take part of that? Can we work together on that? That's the second layer. And then the third layer of trust, which is really where it gets fun, is, can we create something together? And I love how he said, in that case, you're not worried about who gets the credit. You're not worried about, your own ego at that point. You're literally just saying, there is a cause, an opportunity, or a need that is greater than all of us. And we don't exactly know what it's going to take, but let's come together. Let's bring our smartest people. Let's bring our most gifted people. Let's bring a diverse group of people together, and let's figure it out together. And that whole process of co-creating solutions, and ideas, and defining outcomes, and starting to move through that. That's, I think, the process of the new kind of leader, the one who can bring people together and have those kind of conversations and actually get productive results. That's a picture of the new kind of leader.
Yeah. And so different and counterintuitive to the model that we've always had before, with exponential growth and, just expansion and all of that. And so, I mean, this really is why you started High Purpose Practice, right, Mike? I mean,
Yeah.
bring people together, helping organizations do something that they haven't done before, giving them the tools and the resources to do that. And this is what you have been doing and what you've been continuing to do.
Yeah, I'm just growing in my passion to do it. I love how Jared said, they had a small staff, but a large team, and that's kind of how I picture this. Is, um, you know, for those of us who are called to really make a difference, and we want to see real change in this time, the challenges are ginormous, in front of us, and we just have to admit that we can't do it alone. And so we need other people. We need to come together and find people that we can create solutions together with. That helps share the load, and it really brings a much bigger impact than we can do on our own. At the High Purpose Practice, what we love to do is help people do that. Like Jared, we love to bring people together. We love to do those convenings. We love to do those coachings. We love to help them walk through that process of having those conversations with their team, with those groups of people. And that could be, a department coming together. It could be an organization coming together. It could be community leaders coming together. It could be people in a region, coming together. So anybody who says, listen, we want to work together on a common goal, a common project, and move from, co-creating outcomes and solutions to actually getting that work done. We love coming alongside people and organizations to do that. So looking forward to more opportunities for sure.
Yeah, I just want to say how refreshing it is to be able to hear these kind of stories and know that there are people out there that are successfully bringing together, especially right now because the world is so divisive. That there are people that are doing the work and coming together and letting go of preferences for the greater good, for these impact. Knowing that what we're headed to in the future, it requires that, and that there are leaders who are making the change in themselves in order to accomplish the greater things that are in the future. And so it's so refreshing to hear. I know that may there be more leaders that are going to do the work. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Mike, High Purpose Practice, go to highpurposepractice.com. If you're in the Eastern Kentucky area even, and you want to know a little bit about Jared and his work there and how he's impacting the community and the changes, we'll have a link in the description for you to click on. At our next episode, we're going to be talking a little bit more about partnership and then, the who when it comes to the teaming and the collective impact. So that's going to be so good. Please tune in for that. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the High Purpose Leadership Podcast. To work with Dr. Mike McCormick, head over to highpurposepractice.com.